All right, it is Friday, April 26th. We are a little bit earlier than usual with the session recap here this afternoon, as I will not be around for the close, and I still wanted to get this recap posted. So let's go ahead and break down the action here, starting off with ES. So this actually was a little bit of a trickier session simply because of where price was located and the action that we saw. So like I had mentioned in one of the voice notes after the session got going, if you were cash or you were, just doing less given the current action, that is all good. That is all good. Anytime we have price trading up into a key area of resistance like we see through here, it's going to be very challenging, especially when we see buyers continuing to push through that resistance area. So location says, look for some type of shorts, but in this case, buyers actually managed to trigger the breakout. And we had one key clue, at least in NQ. I was focused on NQ today, that really suggested that buyers were going to be stepping in and potentially trading higher. I had mentioned that in that voice note in the Traders Think Tank about 1 hour into the session. So if you missed that voice note breakdown, I highly recommend going back and listening to it. I'll recap a bit of it here, but again, I highly recommend going back and listening to that voice note regarding NQ, because there are some important clues there that you can take with you into future sessions. So as far as ES today, we wanted to see again how this near-term resistance zone was going to be treated. This is that 5120 area. So one of the themes we've been talking about this week is the fact that, this is potentially going to settle into a new range. We had kind of mentioned that as early as Monday here. Price actually did trade up into that resistance area, right? Unsurprisingly, Wednesday, you start to get that rollover. You see the structure start to shift here. Thursday, right? Price trades down into the lower part of the range, starting to get into an area of support down through here, right? Not a true test of the absolute low from earlier in the week or from last week, but it is pretty close. It has traded, more than 75% of the range there. So getting pretty close. You see that hourly kind of doji there. Then you get some follow through. That tells us that the reversal is most likely on and price is free to at least test this week's volume point of control. Point of control right through here. That's that yellow line that you see right through here at 5105. Also happens to be last week's volume point of control. So price trades higher into that 5100 area, and then following Microsoft and Google earnings, we have price essentially sitting in a perfect location for this morning's session. So coming into PCE, what we wanted to see was how price was going to be trading versus that 5120. And what we see is you have that initial push higher, right? But it just gets absorbed by sellers. Sellers start to really step in here. Essentially trades 5140, rolls over, and now we are below that 5120. So a nice short entry through here. Now, what's really interesting about this is that, and this was actually more clear in NQ, but what we have is a flush of that overnight low here on ES that gets quickly absorbed. Look how quickly buyers step in here to then push price back up through 5120. So you have a potential short opportunity right through here, 5120 VWAP, right? Once that gets negated, the short, at least in the near term, at least for the next, 15 minutes to hour plus, the short is totally negated. Don't want to, once price clears that 5120 area, you don't want to be thinking short until at the very least you get a retest of that PCE high, right? This is buyers telling you that they're stepping in and, they're pretty much running over sellers for some higher prices. So the setup totally changes character once you get that move up through the 5120. It's pretty much clear to trade into that PCE high, which we see, right? Overshoot of the PCE high. Unsurprisingly, sellers really step in there. Look at that move lower, right? There's a 2-minute chart. From there, VWAP, you have a nice long opportunity versus VWAP as well as some prior intraday structure. So this is going to be an easy money long setup from today. I know some of you in the chat caught that move. And then just a push, continued drift higher into our upside 51.50 level of interest. So overall, some decent action today, a little bit trickier again, simply because price is trading up against this key area of resistance. You start to see this rollover and you're thinking, oh yeah, resistance is going to hold. It's going to be a short. And then late shorts just get trapped right through here, right? And so that's kind of the first clue that was very, very apparent in NQ. Now, as far as what we're looking at for Monday, essentially, I'm going to be working with that same pivot. I want to see if buyers now continue to defend this area, right? Remember, we had talked this morning and earlier in the week, if price actually does break that 51.50, or excuse me, that 51.20, if price actually does break this resistance zone, there was that volume void, which has now been filled for the most part, but there was a complete volume void right through here, right? And so price can trade quickly into that 51.50, which is what we saw today. And now, where are we? Well, price is pretty much back nearly into that prior breakdown point. So location does remain quite tricky. Let's take a look at the fib retracement from, look at that. So the fib retracement from the highs down into last week's low, price is now right into that 50% retracement. What do we know about when we're looking at fib retracements? I personally like to use the 50 and the 61% kind of as, I call it the fib buy zone or the fib sell zone. So I do continue to expect sellers to attempt to roll over price in this area, right? So I'll be looking at that 50%. I'll be looking at that 61%, definitely the declining 21 MA now, just as a reference point, not a big moving average guy. But essentially what we have now is prices offering a near-term breakout of that prior range, right? So this remains a key pivot, the 51.20 on Monday. I'm definitely going to be using that pivot as my primary anchor point for the day's action. Of course, the session is not closed yet. We still have 2 hours before the close, so a lot can happen there. But I want to keep an eye to see if buyers are going to continue to defend this point. And if not, right, we're going to be back within that prior range. So we've got some pretty clean reference points to work with down here. We know that the 50% retracement of this correction is now directly above, is probably what is keeping a lid on things here on ES. So we have two really strong reference points to use on Monday, 51.50 and that 51.20 pivot. The structure is looking quite good here from a technical perspective. So keep that on watch. Now let's jump into NQ. Very similar story, right? You want to see how price is going to trade versus this key pivot right through here. We've been watching that 17,800 for the better part of 2 weeks. And so what we see coming into PCE, you got a test of that prior day high. Prior day high is right here. All right, let me mark a line there so you could see that. Perfect test of the prior day high, reject, right? Key resistance zone, price rejects, okay? Start to set up a series of lower highs. Price actually then flushes that overnight low right through here, right? Now, again, because this seemed like such an obvious short, take a look at the trap that was set. So anytime you, and this is kind of what I was talking about in that voice note, anytime you have what appears to be or what should be a fairly easy setup for one side to really take, in this case it would be the short versus that key resistance zone, and they fail to do so. In this case, sellers fail to really flush it here through that overnight low. Trap gets set. You can see how heavily buyers step in, making a fresh session high there in one single candle and then reclaiming that 17,700 level of interest. That was the first major clue, at least for me personally, that yeah, price is going to trade back up into that 17,800 and that that PCE high. And that is reflected in the executions that I actually took and posted within the Traders Think Tank. So you can take a look at that as well if you like. Now, what we have is price trading up through that key pivot, that PCE high, very similar to what we see in ES. However, NQ still have upside resistance through here, right? It's not quite there yet. Check out the big high volume node right through here. If I zoom in a little bit, we probably have a volume point of control right through here at 900. Yeah, it's right there. So volume point of control from last week right through here at 900. The assumption was that this was all distribution, right? Now pricing a bit of selling versus that upside 17,900 level. So kind of caught in a tricky spot here. This was that daily breakdown point right into 18K, 18,050. And what we would consider a breakout right through here up above the 17,800. So I'll mostly be interested in action versus 17,800 or the 17,950 area, the true high from over here. So just looking at the structure, I know I've drawn all over it now. Let me remove these, but looking at the structure, right? Price showed that change in character here on Tuesday. Get a rollover where you would expect it. Now we have potentially a higher low, right? Maybe a higher low right through here. Now coming into another area where we expect some selling activity. So as I mentioned earlier this week, when you're kind of fighting, when price is kind of fighting a correction move, you really have to pay attention to every area of resistance where sellers may show up, right? Because remember, all of this is like 2 months worth of distribution up here. All of this is distribution, right? And we're still within the context of a daily breakdown play. So some things to keep in mind. Where are sellers going to start to step in again? Well, we expected them here, 17,800. They got run over. Where's kind of the next obvious area? Be right through here or the daily breakdown point, right? So that's NQ Monday. Pretty straightforward. We got some clean levels to work with. Again, this is assuming there's no big volatility event into the close here. As always, share an update during the pre-market prep live stream, and then keep your eye out for that bigger picture analysis to be shared with the weekly kickoff on Sunday. Hope everyone had a great day. Hope everyone had a great week. If you have any trading questions, feel free to shoot me a DM this weekend. Otherwise, I'll see you Monday morning. Have a great weekend. Later.